Welcome to this Saturday Travel and History Tip, and we will be going to 3 forts in the beautiful state of Florida. The first stop is very historic. Packed in the center of the cramped, bustling old city of St. Augustine on 20.5 acres beside the waters of the Matanzas River, Castillo de San Marcos National Monument preserves the oldest masonry fort and only existing 17th century fort in North America. The Spanish came ashore on September 8th, establishing and naming their new village St. Augustine, because the land had first been sighted a little over a week earlier on Spain's feast day of St. Augustine, which was August 28th in 1565. The landing took place at the Indian village of Saloy, a few hundred yards north of what is now the mission of Nombre de Dios. Spanish St. Augustine was the first of only 3 walled cities ever constructed in North America. The other 2 are Charleston, South Carolina, done by the British, and Quebec City, Canada, done by the French. Pedro Menendez de Aviles, along with 600 colonists, established the town in 1565 under a grant from Spain's King Philip II. It was constructed to protect Spanish holdings in La Florida from British intervention. The fort was made of coquina, Spanish for tiny shell, which is a soft limestone made of broken shells and sand, cemented together by calcium carbonate. This creates a natural form of concrete. The stone for the Castillo was quarried on nearby Anastasia Island. There were 9 wood and earth forts before the final stone fort was built. Castillo means castle in Spanish. This is the best preserved example of Spanish colonial fortifications in the lower 48. It originally served as Spain's northernmost outpost in the New World. Construction of the stone and mortar fort began in 1672, drawing to a completion in 1695, with a total of 400,000 cut and set by hand blocks, along with diamond-shaped bastions at each of the 4 corners. When the fort was under attack, the moat was filled with water by opening the floodgates on the sea wall. It was renamed Fort Marion and was used to house Indian prisoners during the Second Seminole War from 1835 to 1842, and lastly, it was used as a military prison during the Spanish-American War. After surviving 4 different flags and many hurricanes, the fort was abandoned in 1900. In over 330 years of world history, the fort was never defeated in battle. Like everyone else who has entered the fort, you must cross the Sally Port, which is the best place to see the massiveness of the fort's 9 to 19 foot thick coquina block outer walls. Nearby, tourists can buy their own bottle of Fountain of Youth, just as Juan Ponce de Leon searched for so many centuries ago. A 20-acre park on the bay distinguishes itself as the site of De Leon Spring. Take a cup to get a drink from the naturally sulfurous spring. Next stop is the cutest fort we've ever seen. As I say here, looking for a distinctive fort experience? Tour Fort Matanzas National Monument on Anastasia and Rattlesnake Islands. Built in 1740 at the south end of Matanza Inlet, the 50-foot square Coquina Fort has a 30-foot tower. The fort's sole purpose was to protect the southern entrance into the Matanzas River, guarding the strategic back door to St. Augustine, 14 miles to the north. During battle, 50 men were stationed there. Otherwise, only 7 to 10 soldiers and 1 officer garrisoned it. Under an ominous sky, we caught a free ride aboard a Park Service ferry boat, reaching the great little fort in only a few minutes. The costume ranger's presentation provided details about the powder magazine, soldiers' eating area, and sleeping quarters found inside the fort, and the mounted cannons on the exterior of the fort. Interestingly, most of the stone fort is original. Guests are allowed to spend as much time as wanted examining the fort, the lookouts of the 2-story watchtower roof, and sentry box. There, 300 soldiers from nearby Fort Caroline squared off in the fall of 1565 with Spanish soldiers in what turned out to be a slaughter of 245 Frenchmen. The battle further cemented the Spaniards' superiority in this region. Speaking of Fort Caroline, that is our final stop here at the Florida forts. Pressed between the lower St. Johns and Nassau rivers, the Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve is located in Jacksonville, which is the state's most populated city. The preserve encompasses 46,000 acres of estuarine natural resources. It has historic sites and is 75% wetlands with undeveloped salt marshes, accessible only by boat. The park includes 4 distinct sites: Fort Caroline National Memorial, the Kingsley Plantation, the Theodore Roosevelt area, and Cedar Point. We are going to focus on Fort Caroline National Monument. This memorial pays tribute to France's effort to establish a permanent colony in Florida in 1564. Strategically located on the St. Johns River, the original Fort de la Caroline was named Land of Charles in honor of King Charles IX and was constructed under the leadership of René Goulaine de Laudonnière. Jean Ribault sailed from France in May 1565 with over 600 soldiers and settlers to refortify Fort Caroline. He was killed at Fort Matanzas by Spanish Admiral Pedro Menendez de Avilés, who was charged with establishing a settlement in Florida and removing the French. The admiral captured Fort Caroline, renaming it San Mateo. The Spanish considered these Frenchmen to be pirates and a threat to their lucrative shipping lanes. The ill-fated French colony was abandoned 6 years later, and nothing remains of it. A near full-scale rendering of the fort is the first stop off the trail from the visitor center. The slender, fanciful-colored cannons, along with the grass and ivy-covered fort walls, define this most unique-looking of all the forts we have toured. A narrow trench creates the perimeter of the fort. These three forts, in close proximity to each other, are very unique and certainly an exciting stop on anyone's fort tour. It's all a part of American history. Learn it, love it, appreciate it. Don't let them steal our history. Teach children our American history. And next Saturday, a fort near you. Hope you watch the Saturday Travel and History Tips. And if you appreciate our content, tell others and repost on your social platforms. Thank you.